envisioned it was in slow motion, even still now.
While I was working at 662, I heard something over the Nextels that we all carried for security. And what I heard was, got him.
No, that's news to me. The only phones I know of, I think, are all through AT&T.
These radios that we keep talking about, the Nextel telephones, two-way radios, they had pretty much just come into play, because originally all we had were the regular radios, just the radio itself, and probably closer to around the time of us coming out to Las Vegas, around the time frame of Pac being killed, I would say that those Nextel phone radios had just come into play for right-way security. There was only, it's a guess, there was probably only 4 or 5 of them. Okay, but it was enough to go around to the people that mattered that should have had them.
The Nextel information is news.
The Voice was definitely one of our security that works directly for Mr. Knight.
Michael Moore, the night that Tupac was shot, after being taken off of Tupac with me, went back over to Club 662.
Maybe the police should have concentrated more on death row, the Nextel phone bills, and other things that could have helped them investigate it more in depth. I would definitely look more at death row than I would look at Mr. Anderson, and that's from what I've gathered when I was at New York, what I heard Pac tell Suge Knight, and what I heard over that radio that night after the shots were fired.
They got word that Tupac and Suge had been shot. So Michael was with Reggie, and they went to the hospital together. And Michael talks about hearing something over the radio. Well, he would have heard it over Reggie's radio, because he wouldn't have had a radio that night.
Right before me and Mr. Wright got in the vehicle to go get to the hospital, someone else came on the radio and said, hey, don't say nothing over the radio.
That communication, however obtained, either through search warrant or otherwise, needs to be gathered, because how can you tell a conspiracy if you don't have the conspirators and you don't have the communication between the people that are actually running the conspiracy?
You've got to know a timeline of the individual who is your target. You've got to know where they're at, where they're going to be, who they're going to be surrounded by. And the second thing is, following that timeline, knowing when there is, you're going to have to plan according to that.
Mr. Wright and I were talking about what had happened, and I just clearly heard somebody say, don't say that over the radio. But the person who said it was not Homeboy Security, nor was it one of our security guards. It was, to me, it would be like a stranger. Someone, and the person that said that was Caucasian, definitely not African American.
Nextel sold a push-to-talk feature, which was essentially a walkie-talkie over a cell phone line. With it, conversations could be transmitted via speakerphone. This was how Moore heard the conversation on Wright's cell phone. But was this a random broadcast meant for a wider audience, with Moore and Wright only passive listeners? That's possible now. But what about in 1996? We asked the Sprint Nextel Corporation to comment on the ability to communicate with a group on the push-to-talk feature.
My name is Jack Flans. I'm a communications manager for Sprint Nextel. Group talk for the push-to-talk product was not available in 1996 as it is now.
So if a Nextel radio broadcast had to be a point-to-point conversation, and Moore hears the message over Wright's Nextel, then only one conclusion remains. Someone with immediate knowledge of the kill called Wright directly.
Right after the car sped off, I jumped out of the car and I ran up to the back of the BMW. As I was approaching the BMW, as I got about to the trunk, the car did a U-turn. There's absolutely no way I thought that that car was moving, because with all of the rounds that went through that car, they were dead.
One of the other elements of planning that's sometimes used and sometimes not is, how can we cover up the hit itself? Can we make this look like an accident, or can we make this look like a random act? Because the best thing an assassin can do is to make it look like it was a random act of violence, that it was not an assassination at all.
When the car did a U-turn, the other cars that was with us in the entourage, the car that was in front of Suge and the car that was next to Suge, all did a U-turn.
2 bike cops who were in the parking garage right above, on the second floor of the parking garage above the shooting, hear bang, bang, bang. They jump on their bikes, take their bikes downstairs, and boom, they're on the scene immediately, so quickly that they're able to follow and then hit their little shoulder radios that, there's been a shooting at Koval and Flamingo.
Got back over to the Las Vegas Boulevard, turned left on Las Vegas Boulevard as he's jumping mediums. He's blowing his tires, messed up his rims and all of that, as pictures show. With this crime scene tape being put around this car, and it happened so fast, like I can't even believe how fast it was. This tape was up as myself and the Outlaws and the other 2 guys, which was, with Suge, tried to go into the tape, the crime scene tape. We were told not to, and they, at that point in time, put us down on the curb, put us down in a prone position, and I said to the one cop that I was the bodyguard, and he allowed me to come in. When I got up under the tape, and Suge was laying on the ground in a prone position, and I told the cop, I said, he's the CEO of the record label, and that's Tupac in the car. That's when Suge, they let him up off the ground, and Suge and I ran around to the passenger side of the car with the cop, and we were all trying to open the door. And the cop, Suge said, it's my car, I know how to open the door, whatever. So he opened the door, and that's when, pulled Pac out of the car and laid him on the ground.
You have the preliminary crime scene, which has been cordoned off, and usually your forensics are there by now, your paramedics are there by now, everyone is at the preliminary crime scene.
And yet both cops, 2 bicycle cops, not one of them stays at the scene. Both of them leave the scene.
The victim's vehicle was 2 to 3 vehicles back from the intersection. The Cadillac pulled up immediately beside them, stopped, and opened fire.
Where the car broke down at, all of the cops were right there, and there was a lieutenant, and he walked over to me, and we were talking, and I said, that's not the car. It was a white car over there already. It was like a Nissan or something like that, and he was saying that was the car, and I said, that's not the car. I said, that's not the car. It was a white Cadillac, and he was telling me, you don't know what you're talking about, shut up.
And we are looking for a suspect vehicle which was described as a white or off-white Cadillac, newer model Cadillac.
And then another cop walked over to him and said something to him, and he just turned and walked away from me.
It amazes me that when we have professional bodyguards as part of this entourage, that they can't even give us an accurate description of the vehicle.
Kevin Manning from Las Vegas PD, he said that no bodyguard could accurately give a description of the white Cadillac. Well, I am the one that said that there was a white Cadillac.
So right now it appears that the gunshots were fired from the suspect vehicle only, again, which is described as a white or light-colored newer Cadillac.
Suspect vehicles that have left the scene at a high rate of speed that would draw attention to them. If there are vehicles noted by the witnesses, the preliminary officers and the sergeant, our supervisor on the scene, would issue an all-points bulletin describing the vehicle.
There are helicopters available, and the police headquarters is downtown, which isn't very far. It's just a couple of miles away from where the shooting took place. They could have dispatched almost immediately. I'm sure some were on call almost immediately, if not news cameras, news crews could have been in the area.
And our standards operating procedure, or a procedure that we follow, is basically that. If we have a witness came forward and say, I saw this, it was this type of vehicle, the first thing we're going to do is get on the radio and start having every agency in the area look for that vehicle. Put out the word, this is what we're looking for, this is a vehicle of interest that could be considered armed and dangerous. Let's find this vehicle, because that is a huge, huge piece of the puzzle that we need to put in place.
It just didn't feel like a typical murder investigation. I mean, my God, the biggest man in rap, was killed, and yet they were acting, I hate to use this word, but it felt lackadaisical.
This is the vehicle we want. This was the last direction of travel that that is known to us.
They could have closed I-15. They could have, they'll close it for an accident. Not even leave a small accident, not even leave a lane open for motorists. So it's not like they're worried about the motorist. They could have closed I-15. They could have closed a strip. They could have walled the place off. You had Nevada Highway patrolmen on, on extra duty. You had Metro Police on overtime working. It's a Tyson fight.
And being intent on looking for that particular vehicle, on sitting on the side of the road, waiting for that vehicle to drive past them. But at the same time, you give the description, the direction of travel that you know of, you're going to have many agencies start to look for that particular vehicle to cover those roadways.
At state line, the Nevada Highway Patrol has an office that's manned. And so all they would have to do is radio 30 to 40 minutes away. That's how long it would take to get to the state line. They could have roadblocked that thing so fast it wouldn't have been funny.
Man, I don't think the police really care, to be honest with you. I don't think nobody really cares.
Las Vegas Metropolitan Police also has a sub-office at the airport. So the airport police, Metro Police, already on the scene at the airport, could have been on alert for, the shooter coming out of there too.
Whether it's some type of diversion tactic to take their attention away, to let them drop their guard for a moment, up into the point of how you're going to get out there after the hit.
Now, them looking for the Cadillac and doing the things that they should have done to find that Cadillac, obviously they weren't fast enough and didn't get, to finding it because it was never found.
Compton police claim to have identified this Cadillac as the shooter's vehicle. It was a rental car, the only white Cadillac rented in Los Angeles that weekend. Las Vegas police claimed they never received that information.
Because obviously, you got to understand, I came into this call. In fact, I was woke up to go do the investigation.
The protocol for the preliminary investigators at a crime scene are to gather as many witnesses as possible. If a witness is not cooperative, then they should be placed under arrest for that moment as a material witness or hindering an investigation of a police officer.
Those guys are sitting right next to each other and they're talking to each other. And you never have witnesses to a crime sit there and sit with each other. You isolate them, you take them to a holding cell, put them in different cells. They've got room especially for that.
But the prime players, the secondary level players, they should be all isolated so as not to experience misinformation effect or to give false information or to congeal their information into one witness.
When the detectives arrived, and Detective Becker at the time was the homicide detective on the case, he took us individually one at a time into his car and started talking to us. As he was trying to talk to us and to get answers, I'm not speaking for everyone, but I'm going to speak for myself, that I was in a clear state of mind to answer him, period, because all of this stuff is running through my head.
Frank Alexander, who was Tupac's bodyguard, who was driving the car behind him, was someone we interviewed.
I just saw my friend get shot, and not only him being my friend, I'm the bodyguard, I'm supposed to be protecting him, and I couldn't do anything. No one would have been able to do anything, but the fact is, myself nor anyone else were in a frame of mind to answer any kind of questions at that particular point in time.
Again, people were evasive, didn't want to say much of anything. They didn't see anything. They aren't going to, they aren't telling us everything that they know.
And it was basically the police talking as if they were at the mercy of the people who were witnesses to the case. That, oh well, they won't talk to us, and Suge Knight won't talk to us. We haven't talked to him yet. He won't return our calls.
I was never interviewed by any of the police agencies, the FBI, nor Las Vegas PD, and I found that to be a little strange because for the last week I was with Tupac, and I didn't get a single question from anyone about what I thought, what my theory was on what happened, nor about the Nextel phones where I had heard the conversation that said, got him.
No interviews. This is my first any kind of interview.
Any other federal agencies? No.
These people should be isolated and transported, whether they wanted to or not, to the police station. because they're material witnesses.
He's going to have to make some very difficult choices.